Great, folks. I think we'll get started now. I'm Billy Cioffredi, physical therapist and founder of Cioffredi Associates Physical Therapy. I'm also a certified ergonomic specialist. I'm delighted to be here today for this lunch and learn. We have been around a long time as an organization. I've been doing this for 40 years, 35 years for our organization, treating musculoskeletal pain problems. About of those 20 years, we've been involved in ergonomics, on-site at businesses, where we'll go in and do evaluations there, see people on site. So we've been in the business for a long time with this, and I'm delighted to help today. So I'd like to thank my colleague, Matt Goodell, who's behind the scenes here, who's helped put this together, and my IT master. So I appreciate him, and you'll get a chance to see him at the end of our presentation here. And let's see, Matt, I need to move this screen, and it doesn't want to respond to that. Great, good. So with a brief presentation, we need to keep this kind of short to the fundamentals. So the main goals would be to look at key trouble sources, how you can address them, and some key prevention exercises. So my thought is that some of you may find the most valuable benefit in specific questions. So I'm delighted to take as many questions. I have plenty of time afterwards. My thought would be just to flow through this so I can give you the background on it and then get into any specifics that you'd like. So here we go. Ergonomics, not to get a confusion with the term, it's simply the adaptation, adapting the environment and processes to the individual worker to optimize efficiency and safety. So with the environment, it might be anything from lighting to the equipment and things like that. And as far as processes go, well, if you were thinking about you're cooking something up in the kitchen and you're standing at the island, but half the stuff you like to use is around the island to the other side. You get this process that's really inefficient. So that's the part of that relates to the ergonomics and the process part of things. So particular situation right now is that we are adapting to a pandemic. So we are spending a lot more time, for many of us, in front of screens, both at work maybe and at home. And in addition to that, we might be doing webinars, might be doing video in the evening, helping the kids who are now on doing stuff online. And then our setups at home are not necessarily ideal, let's say. Laptops are just another element about this, that they are made for portability. And while so many of us work off of those, they're made for, not made for a fixed use where things are set up really nicely. They're made for short duration stuff, although that's not how we oftentimes use them. So when we just think about the pain problems that often come along with any kind of work that can potentially develop pain problems, it's sustained postures and repeated movements are the two elements that get us when we're doing this seemingly lightweight work here. But even optimal postures, if they're sustained too long, can be a source of pain. And repeated movements, even if they're very small movements, can be like clicking the mouse, but click, 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 or just the keyboarding itself can be a small motion that can be a problem. So particularly if we're really out of alignment or using poorer postures, then that really amplifies the potential for problems for us. So when we're thinking about the optimal ergonomic setup and posture, this is not it. This probably looks like a familiar scene to many of you. This is a familiar scene at my house. So that's a daughter who is actually teaching, and my wife, we won't say what she's doing on her iPad there, but that's real world stuff. But this is really some of the optimal things that we're going to look at for the setup. Number one, and probably the most important element that I can really talk to you about is when you're using a computer, the setup, the alignment so that you get your elbow at a right angle and your hand and wrist relatively flat is the most important part of anything. So if you are like me at home, we have this beautiful oak desk from my father-in-law, and the only way that I can really get it to work would be to raise my chair up to get my alignment right. And so the first thing is get the chair height set so that our elbows are at a right angle when you're upright and relaxed. The other part that's important with this is that lumbar support, the hollow in our low back. If you're in a chair that doesn't provide some of that support, over time, our head and shoulders will start to come forward. And that'll look like some of the picture you saw a minute ago. So the chair height, key. Lumbar support, key. So the next thing, if you raise the chair up and your feet don't touch the ground, you got to put something underneath. So it's exactly what I've got at home. I went home and I went to work, took one of the office chairs home and put it there and brought a footstool so that I can, the longer times at home when we were out of the office, I could do that. So number 3, but maybe the second most important piece, is setting the monitor. So the monitor needs to be at an angle where ideally, if you're looking at it, your eyes are going to focus about 1/4 of the way down from the top of the monitor. And actually, the monitor I'm working off of right now is just like the one in the picture where it is, and you'll see at the end of the show, I'm working in my office. I consider this my conference table. And I've got a piece that's hooked onto the table so that I have a monitor that I can sit up and look at. So that is the next key element for things. Now, in this picture, there's something that looks like a laptop screen there. And that's not a laptop. That would be something that somebody who is holding a piece of paper that they wanted to read the paper from so they can transcribe information onto the computer or whatever. But that would be a very common location of a screen if that was a laptop screen. And you can just imagine what would happen with a person tilting their head down to do that. So the height of the monitor is key. There's a fancy hook on that one, but you can use anything you want that would raise that up. The other part of that is tilting the screen. So you're going to want to tilt the screen so that it is at a perpendicular angle to where you're viewing. So the lower the screen, the more it's going to have to be tilted in order to make it work right for you. Good. All right, next thing is going to be set the keyboard angle so that our wrists are relatively flat in line with our forearm. This piece here, if our wrist is not in what we call a neutral position or somewhere close to that, you can imagine if we're have the wrist cocked just a little bit, and if you're going to be there in that position for a long time, even if your fingers are moving, then the muscle is on tension for long periods of time. And it's the same kind of situation where if the chair is not at the right height and you have your shoulders elevated just slightly, but you can imagine if you're doing that over a long period of time, the tension builds and it becomes a real problem with that. All right, if you have a mouse, then getting that one in line as well. The key thing about this, if you have a mouse that's outside of not a trackpad, if you have it set up where you've got to extend your reach for that, that is one of the other elements that often facilitates shoulder problems in particular, but it can be shoulder, neck, and it could be the hand and wrist as well. But you want to have your mouse positioned where it's a very comfortable reach for you. So now let's look at standing postures here. And this is real life stuff, the picture on the left. So you can see that my elbows and arms, they're at about a 90-degree angle, so that's fine for that. But you also notice with a laptop, I've got to look down for that. So fortunately, I don't have volumes of computer work to do, and that was fine for a short period. But actually, when I was doing Zoom work, I had this up on a much higher level where I was primarily just looking at the screen, so that was up there. So the woman on the right, you can see that if the table is the wrong height, she's got her kind of the heel of her hand down on the desktop. So if you're in a position where you have some pressure on the heel of your hand or your wrist like that, that's where the carpal tunnel is located, where muscles, tendons, and nerve tissue goes through that area. And over a prolonged period of time, the pressure on that can irritate that area and create some serious conditions with tendons and nerve problems like the median nerve, which goes through there. So optimal standing posture, this is all very similar to the sitting posture, except you don't have a chair. So the first thing is really having the keyboard. If you've got a keyboard you can move around as far as a tray, or if you have a box or whatever, so that in a standing position, your elbow is at a right angle and your wrists and things are flat, is the number one thing. Good. So the number two thing is going to be the monitor. And so in this case, if you have something to hook the monitor onto, terrific. But if not, it may be a box, it may be reams of paper, it may be whatever you want to use so that you can elevate your monitor. So you got a laptop, you're not moving the laptop, you're only going to be able to tilt it. But if you have a separate remote monitor, then you can do that. So this is the pitch for if you are working from home in particular, or if you're at work, if you are spending long periods of time in front of the computer, there's high value to having a separate monitor where you can really position it where it should be for your optimal viewing, both for your neck and shoulder things. It's also going to be really helpful for your vision, for your eye stuff. All right, and then setting the keyboard as we talked about before. The other thing with standing is if you like to stand a long time, some people, whether it's a back problem or some other thing, they just feel more comfortable standing. You can stand all day if that feels good to you, but you may want to consider a foot pad if you're on a hard surface. So here are some wrist rests that are commonly used, and they can be very helpful in the sense of a comfort level with keeping your wrist in that relatively neutral position. This is all individual, so you know best on how it feels to you. If without a wrist rest, you feel totally fine and looks like your wrist is relatively flat, terrific. If it doesn't feel right, or you have an opportunity just to test this out, and you put it there, and it just feels nice. That's probably the answer about whether or not there's value for you or not. So laptop considerations, monitor size. Again, I mentioned before, it's like if you can have a remote monitor, if you're going to be working for long periods of time, it would be highly valuable for you. The other piece is if you work off of a number pad, then having a remote keypad, a remote keyboard can be of real value that way as well. You can just plug it right in. And then mouse or trackball or trackpad. Multiple monitor considerations. So some of us work, and you'll see Matt, my IT guy, and our PR and marketing genius here, works off of 2 screens. So it's not uncommon where I've seen people working from 2 screens, but they're 2 different sizes. It's not uncommon to see people working from one standard size screen and then the other being a laptop. The challenge with that is that the focal length is really different, and then if the font size is different, and going back and forth really creates some eye strain. And I'll just mention it now as far as a plug goes. If you wear glasses, and if you have bifocals or if you have transition glasses, sometimes they are part of a challenge in getting things at the right height so that you are not leaning in or changing things with your head and neck because of trying to create the focus with your vision. So that's an important part to know, because it can be part of a source of neck pain or headaches and things like that from those kind of postures. All right, so there are a lot of commercial standing desks now that are available. And in our office, we have all our staff that really are reception staff and really working on computers. We have them have the option of doing the sit or stand. And that's one of the benefits, is that you can actually do one or the other and change it up. The prices have come down on those. There's a variety of people making them now. Some of the considerations for this are kind of the space need that you have if you get something that is a standing desk piece that you put on your desktop. If you have to do writing with part of your work, then you're going to want to consider, is there enough space on that where you can do your writing in there as well? And the same thing with the mouse, because this is one of those situations where if it fits the key tray, but the mouse, and you're using a mouse, and you have to reach and put it in a different location that causes you to reach out, that can be the source of a problem for it. There are some that are as inexpensive as like $180 or so, where it's just one platform that goes up and down. It doesn't have a key tray or anything, and that can be great for your needs. But sometimes the weight capacity is limited. So in one of the places on site that I've been at, people working in illustration and things, they really needed and benefited from 2 monitors, and even the single one they were using originally was very heavy, and it was outside the weight capacity for this, which was 25 pounds. So others can go up much higher, 35 pounds, even 45 pounds, but be aware of that when you're considering that.
There's somebody waiting to get on it.
Yeah.
I'll just.
We're just double checking to see if there's someone who is jumping on late here.
Looks like, I think we're all set actually. Come on, me.
All right, cool. So adaptations for home. So you see the picture on the left, and here's the plug for if you really are truly doing your job now at home, and you spend a good part of the day in front of the computer. There is high value to having a formal chair that is made for this kind of work with multiple adjustments for the individual, the height, the tilting, and those things, and oftentimes have lumbar support. But if that's not the case, and maybe you're only doing part-time stuff at home, then just using some kind of a support that goes behind your lower back, there's little special rolls for that, or you can just get a towel and roll it up and stick it there as well. But it's a key element that's really helpful. So the reams of paper in the middle are things that relate to, oftentimes, with these additional monitors, getting the monitor at the right height, a ream of paper. So at home it can be a box, it can be anything you want, but placing it up is important. And so picture on the right, that is in my office, and so I put my laptop on that piece so I can be on top of the file cabinet in a standing position for periods of time to change it up. So some key preventive exercises. These are simple, and the key element for them is that if you do them intermittently during the day, that's where they're going to help maintain length of muscle, help the circulation through the muscles and things, as opposed to if you do them like once a day in the morning or at night. So these are ideally meant to be done every 30, 60 minutes. So that first one there is really stretching the back of our neck. So that's something, it's an area that gets stiff, tight, easily, especially if we're leaning forward and trying to reach the screen. But it is just bringing your neck back, bringing your chin in to stretch the back of your neck, and you hold it for 3 to 5 seconds and do about 5 of them in a row, 3 of them in a row, and then go on to the next thing. All right, upper trap stretch, though, muscles in the neck that go down into the shoulder. You can use your hand to pull across if you want, or just use the muscles in your neck. But it is another really simple exercise to be done regularly on each side, maybe again 3 times. This one is key because oftentimes the front of our shoulders get tight, front of the arms, and our upper backs between our shoulder blades get stiff and tight. So just pinching your shoulder blades together, or if you grasp your hands behind your lower back and then pinch your shoulder blades back while you're holding your hands, then that's another great fundamental exercise to do regularly. And then the arms, the forearms and wrists. So here with the palms up, stretching one side of the forearms, or the muscles that go into the hand and wrist, and then the other one, reversing it so our palms are down and stretching it back that way. We sit a lot, and so just a standing back bend is really very helpful when we're working so much in a sitting position. And then exercises like this from a seated position are just a good way to keep our hips mobile, which really unload part of our back. And finally, just going up on the balls of our feet, and you can do this while you're sitting down, just to help the circulation through there. So those are basic exercises as well. The other key thing I'll mention to you is, because we are in front of screens with all the kinds of stuff we've been doing during this pandemic, keeping ourselves active is really important in these times. So walking, hiking, they're very basic exercises, but they are really part of our overall health. You get yourself breathing well, and deep breathing, we haven't talked about it today, but that's just another element that can be a useful tool while we're working in a seated position or standing in front of a computer. So here's my summary, the things we've gone over. And there's my man, Matt, in front of his dual screens, both sitting and standing. And you can see Matt has all kinds of paraphernalia on the top of his desk because he fidgets all day long. And so he's looking for something to click or pop or whatever makes some kind of noise. But he's a smiling guy and a boy genius for us. Here's an important takeaway for you. If you have persistent pain, sometimes that may be because of how you're set up and doing things. It can be because of some precondition that you have, where it's, you've had a history of neck pain or back or shoulder stuff, or we've gone out with the early spring this year and we spent a lot of time in the garden because we're at home, more time to work around the house. And so we have these pain conditions that come on in our neck, shoulder, elbow, hand, and wrist that are not going away, or they're getting more intense. We are highly skilled in treating these kind of things, and there are solutions for that. So if you've got that going on, do consider just giving us a buzz and come in for some treatment, because that doesn't have to be that way. And finally, workplace wellness is something that is part of our program, where we go on site and we do ergonomic assessments on site. Early surveillance for early intervention of things is part of what we do, and we really enjoy doing it. And so here's the picture from the side view, and that's my screen. It's locked onto my kitchen table conference room, and now we're working out here. So I hope you found this of help, but I'm delighted to answer any specific questions you have now. So Matt, if you handle that, I'll be here for whatever you got time for.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and share the slide deck on out with you folks. But in the meantime, if any of you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, turn your video back on, ask any questions, or if you want to go ahead and just post something to the chat, we're happy to answer that as well.
Thanks, I found that really helpful. I like those just short exercises you can do yourself, especially the trap one, because one of the things I've noticed, I'm a healthcare clinician, and so I'm actually in the same setup I was when I was seeing patients live, but now I'm doing everything by phone. And I'm ending up with all this trapezius tension that I wasn't having when I was seeing people live. So I've thought, well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously I'm doing something different, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. And I can think about that myself, and obviously do you have any thoughts, like what might be causing that?
Sure. Are you working off of your phone a lot?
No, I have a laptop on an extender from a desk, and then I have a keyboard that actually I have in my lap, and
So
then I talk on the phone. So the keyboard's lower than the,
oh, gotcha.
And
Yes.
actually in the middle of your talk, I got up and I put a box under my laptop. So I'm going to check that out, because it might have been a little low for my sight.
Yep.
So that was already an interesting idea.
Great. Good. So being on the phone for extended periods of time, it's a common element that I'll see with certain people in industry. And if you were on for a long time, I'm just looking over to Matt, because I have headphones myself. And if I'm going to be on, I'm going to use the headphones. Because if you're you can hold that with your hand, but if you're sometimes just holding it by cradling it with your shoulder, that's going to be a real source of problems for you.
Yes, sorry,
but-
just to interrupt. I've got to say, I do it all on speakerphone. So
okay, all right. So now if you're on speakerphone, which is a good option, I'd have to just say, hey, great. So what when you think about your position and you looked at the positions we demonstrated there, how are you sitting in your chair? So are you upright where you're kind of comfortably erect, or are you kind of in a chair where you're, well, a bit off angle and slouched a little bit? It doesn't have to be a lot, but it then puts us where things are on tension. So I would look at your posture and just think about that from the seated position. And again, if it's long periods of time, it's you're not moving much. You, us, any of us. And so it is that intermittent moving, even if you're turning your head side to side periodically, just to change the length and the tension of the tissues. That's the difference between when you're working with telehealth compared to if you're in clinic seeing clients, just moving around. That makes sense?
I like that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions via the chat or over audio?
Great, folks. Well, we've been there. It's been about a half an hour now. Happy to wrap up. We're always a resource in the community, so if you have questions or issues like this, you can feel free to email me. Be delighted to help in any way that I can, and hope you found this helpful.
Thank you. Yes, this will be helpful.
Good.
Yes, thank you. Definitely helpful.
Good. Thank you.